of service. But the people who fought and civilians who supported the war effort know there is more to be told. The Veterans History Project was conceived to collect and archive those stories and to ensure that they take their rightful place as part of American history. Channel 3 Eyewitness News, 1st Tennessee, and Erlanger are proud to help our veterans and support personnel record their stories. We're honored that we had a small part in the project that makes the story you're about to see available for generations to come.
It's February 25th, the year 2003, and this is the beginning of an interview with Mr. Sanders at Erlanger Helping Plus office, 975 East 3rd Street. He was born on February 18th, 1922, and is now 81 years old. My name is Tony Mavrades, and I will conduct this interview. If you would, sir, please state your name for the recording and its spelling.
Paulie Bill Sanders. That's a nickname, Bill.
Okay. Spell Sanders for us to make sure we get that straight on the tape.
S-A-N-D-E-R-S.
And which branch of service did you serve in?
101st Airborne.
Okay. And what was your highest rank?
PFC.
And where did you primarily serve? What area of the world?
European theater. All my combat duties was in European theater, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, Mr. Sanders, give me an idea as we get started where you were born and maybe a little bit about your family, any brothers or sisters or anything like that.
All right. My dad and mother, Rose Burr Sanders. My mother, Minnie J. James Sanders. I've got 3 brothers and 3 sisters living.
Okay.
And oldest brother is Randall. Willie W.H. Sanders is my second brother. And my baby, whom I live with now, I was 20 years old. I mean, when he was born.
Okay, goodness.
I was going into service when he was born, and I live with him now.
Okay.
R.B. Sanders is his name. And my sisters, one of them lives at Groot Little Auger, and her name is Trina Mae Bolden. She married a Bolden. Got one that lives in Hickson, Tennessee, and her name is Hazel Henley. And one that lives in White Oak, Red Bank, Inez Harrison.
Okay.
And that's all my brothers and sisters.
Okay.
And
where were you born?
I was born in Grundy County, a little town named of Comont, Tennessee. And lived there and went to high school there and everything, you know, in Grundy County. And I was drafted from Grundy County.
So you were drafted?
I was drafted.
Do you remember when you got that wonderful little piece of mail with that special invitation?
No, I don't remember, but it was on the 5th. I came to Fort Oglethorpe by train, L&N Railroad. They brought a group of us over here on the train to Chattanooga. Then we went on. I don't remember how we did go down to Fort Oglethorpe, for his train or trucks, I believe, really. And I was sworn in.
What was that date? I'm sorry, I think you mentioned it. I forgot.
November the 15th was the day I was sworn in at Fort Oglethorpe. And I'm sure it's about the same day. It might have been that we came down, you know.
Right.
And then they always give you a 7-day, go back home and get your arrangements made, you know. And so, actually, active duty was November the 22nd, 1942, yeah.
So, where were you off to now that you were officially active?
Well, I was sent to Fort Oglethorpe,
right,
New Jersey,
okay,
for my basic training.
That's kind of a coincidence, didn't you think?
Yeah. Has this been recorded now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A fella that went in with me from Tracy City, that was Grundy County, where was drafted and sent to Fort Oglethorpe. I didn't see him anymore when we went to basic training. I went one way and he went the other way. We was discharged December the 18th, 1945. We came back home on the same train together.
Wow.
Indiana, Camp Atterbury, Indiana. And so I thought that was something that wouldn't happen very often, you know.
Yes, indeed.
Didn't even see him during the service, the war and thing, our time in the Army. And came home with him on the same day.
Wow.
But anyway,
tell me a little bit about basic.
That's what I was fixing to get to right here. And my basic training was real cold weather up there. Since we was in the wintertime there, and you talking about it getting cold, out on the rifle range, that was a lot of our training. And of course, night problems and things like that, where we'd go in and be out without maybe one little blanket or something in all that cold weather.
Right.
And during basic training, we was right across the bay from New York City. And on the weekends, I had the opportunity of going to New York City, and that was my first subway to ever see. And we'd go on a boat across to the bay, you know. But now, basic training was really mostly cold weather, and we stayed in tents. And I don't think I ever saw a building hardly except when they joined paratroopers. Right. But we stayed in tents up there, but they were warm. We had a little stove and used a hard coal. I forget the name of it. Down this area we have soft coal. But we stayed warm while we weren't out in the field working, you know, on the rifle range and everything. But the worst part about our basic training was we were out patrolling beaches. And it was real cold but we would be walking with our M1 rifles, which I think weigh about 9 pounds, and on the sandy beaches. And here'd come a Coast Guard. They stayed in buildings up there, and motels and things, and they would be riding a horse with a sidearm, and we'd be carrying the big heavy rifles, and that would be the difference. And they had plates and everything to eat on. We had the little metal mess kits, you know. And but we done that all the way through till one reason I volunteered for the paratroopers. After basic training, you know, we were up there patrolling beaches and bridges. That's where we'd be doing our guard duty. And I said to myself, we're just going to be here for the full war, you know, duration of the war. And so when about July, or right before July, I decided I'd volunteer for the paratroopers. I wanted to see some combat duty, you know. And so I went to one of the forts there in New Jersey, and they sent me to Fort Benning for my paratrooper training. And but that was pretty hard work there, you know. We was climbing ropes and 20-mile marches, running, all that, push-ups and all that was during July. And that was one of the hottest Julys I guess we've ever had, or I thought it was. And, of course, we had, during paratrooper training, you'd have several things, but before you get to really jumping for your qualifying jumps, you know, jumping out of tires and things like that, you know, and releasing from tires. And but now there's lots of the fellas didn't make it. They washed out, you know. And but we trained there I guess it's 6 weeks. And then we started making our qualifying jumps. 5 qualifying jumps is what you had to do. And on one of those jumps, my biggest fear, packing the chute. I had to pack one of my own chutes. They had riggers, you know, they call them, I believe, that packed all of our, when we would jump, pack our chutes. But one chute we had to pack, and that was the one I sweated out more than any, when I shouldn't have been the one. And but I, even though it was so hard, and enjoyed it, you know, I enjoyed it, and with we in our barracks. That's one time I did stay in a barrack, not in a tent, all the time I was during service. And so we would ice was priceless. You'd give anything for a cup of ice, you know. We'd run out. I mean, the machines and things would, you know, and everybody'd be, well, just sleep in their shorts and things, you know, and through the barracks and all. It's so hot during the night. It'd be weighing the night before you could ever get any sleep. And you wonder, you know, why all this is for. When you do get into combat, you realize that discipline is the thing that you've got. If you didn't have that, you couldn't make it too long if you didn't have it. Cold and hot, you know. And so, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And but when my paratrooper training was over and I'm qualified, got my wings and everything, went to Camp McCall, North Carolina. And when I got up there, they said, "Don't unpack." Now I didn't go. I'm not with the original company. See,
Right.
They had already qualified and was up there at Camp McCall. I joined them there in September, 1st of September, and they said, "Don't unpack. We're going to Tennessee on maneuvers." And so I stayed there just overnight. Then the next day we came to Tennessee, down around Tullahoma.
Sure.
And Camp Forest was the name of the camp, I believe, down there. And all that time, that was good training there. We little pup tents. You tour some little pup tents. And you talking about weather? It was in September and October there, long. But we had all kinds of training in that cold, rainy weather. And it was, well, that was as bad as any combat I had, I guess, because we'd have problems, and night problems. We'd go out without any blankets or anything, you know, and just foot the weather, go with the weather. And we'd have also the long hikes and all that, and it was really rough. But one good part about that was those farm ladies down there, we'd even march and Tullahoma to Lebanon. And up in Lebanon there, while I was bivouacking out, you know, those ladies would invite us out to supper. And I called it supper, they call it dinner now, I believe. And they'd cook the fried chicken and make biscuits. And those old Yankees, they had never seen many biscuits, my buddies. And those ladies would say, "Go get some more hot ones." They wouldn't say, "Go get a biscuit." They'd say, "More hot biscuits, you know." And they talked about that all during the war. And so that was a good part of the Tennessee maneuvers. And also, during Tennessee maneuvers, I had opportunity. I lived in Palmer at that time, which is about 50 miles away, I guess. But I had a sergeant, and after our day's work was over, our marches and things, he and I would slip off and hitchhike home. And get home, a lot of nights, get home about 10, 11 o'clock, my mother would get up and cook us chicken. And I had purchased a 1941 automobile before I went in service. And my brother, he was 17 years of age. He never did get in the Army, you know. And but he would take us back the next morning, time to get for our next day's training.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another good part of it. And but he was really dating my sister. She was 2 years younger than I was, you know. Wasn't dating, but they kept in touch all during the war. And but that's another thing that I enjoyed during my service time, you know. He died about this year. He died in...
But did he marry your sister or not?
No, he didn't marry.
Okay.
He married another one.
Okay.
He and his wife now, he made a career out of the Army.
Okay.
Yeah, lived in Gary, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
I mean Anderson, Indiana, not Gary. And he and his wife had 10 children.
Wow.
Yeah, and I didn't see him till after the war until about 40 years later.
Wow.
And he came by my home to see me, told me about the reunion they had started. And so I started going to several of those.
Wonderful.
And
So how things go after the Tennessee maneuvers?
okay.
What was next after that?
All right. That's another... And I'm not even going to fool this thing here. Because,
Okay, we're doing okay?
Yeah, you think we're doing all
I
right?
think we're doing well.
Well, went back to... Now, one of the forts in North Carolina, I don't remember where I've been trying to figure that out, where we went back to Camp McCall or Fort Bragg. Mm-hmm. And we stayed there, still training, you know. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't too long till we went overseas. And we must stay there a month or so, though, because I believe the maneuvers went through September and October.
Okay.
All that cold, and it rained every day in Tennessee here, I reckon. But we went back to Fort Bragg, and then in early January, we went to Boston, and Boston Harbor there, went overseas.
Okay.
And going overseas took us 13 days by boat. We was going by boat. And there's zigzagging submarines. They knew where all of them was, the German submarines and so forth. We landed in Glasgow. And then from Glasgow, we took a train down to Lambarn, England. That's where the picture was taken that I gave you. We trained there in Lambarn until we jumped in June. That was the first combat jump in Normandy in June. And so we had lots of tough training there too, you know. And as I say, we wondered why all this was necessary.
Right.
Sleeping out without covering, all that, cold weather. But we found out later why. Yeah. And so we went up to jump. Well, we made one or two jumps in England, you know, training jumps. Mm-hmm. And we went up one to jump once, and it was so windy. We didn't jump. We came back, and that was the first time I ever landed in a plane. Yeah, that was my first time to ever land in one. Yeah, and so, but we had 11 jumps altogether. Is what I've had in service, you know, but some of those were in England. And then I believe we might have had qualifying jumps and one other in the States, in Fort Benning. Mm-hmm. Or maybe one of them won at Fort Benning, one somewhere else. But anyway, in the States we did have 6 jumps. And then we'll get to that, jumped in Normandy there, you know, in June the 6th. But after our training in England. And then in Normandy, the jump was at night, 6 o'clock. I mean, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I believe is about when it was. And I landed in a big wheat field. And we had, in my plane now, there was 21. And I was next to the last boy out. And the boy behind me, we were going to get together when we got on the ground. I have never seen him yet. Mm. He was captured that next morning, I think. And I did see his picture in a Michigan, one of the, the American Legion organizations. And never did I tried to get in touch with him about the reunion, and finally did get in touch with his family. And they said he was deceased, had just died just shortly before that. And I'm sorry I didn't get to see him, Mm. But now, the night that we jumped in Normandy, the next morning, I watched some of our boys being loaded on a German truck, captured. And, of course, we had these little old snap bugs, for signals. That was their password. Mm-hmm. And I remember very well the next morning, I pulled a pin on a grenade. Thought here, I didn't know who it was, German or what, and it's a couple of my buddies. Mm-hmm. And I never did tell them, but I put that pin back in that grenade, and I got worried a lot about had I released that too far or not, Mm-hmm. And I got thinking about that the other night. And but anyway, we were dropped in the wrong DZ. Mm. And really is in the German bivouac. And we waded irrigation ditches, me and these two fellas. Finally, there was 6 of us all together. And it took us 8 days to get back to our company. Wow. But eventually, I think we wound up with 21 people, and one of them was an officer. Mm-hmm. All those had dropped in the wrong place too, And but my dad had passed away. I'll tell about that later on. She had received a telegram, missing in action, and so they had a little memorial service for me there at Palmer. And it was quite a bit later, she received a letter from Miss Sergeant that I was telling you about. I was bad about writing. I did write, but later on they got one from him first, mm-hmm. telling about me, being there with him. Mm-hmm. And so that revived things around home. Good. Yeah. Good. And but in the Normandy invasion there, we went ahead and worked our way back to our outfit. Took 8 days, as I said. We got a lot of help from the German people. We didn't have water, food, we ran out, and they would bring it to us. But we didn't wade those ditches a couple of days there. Then we got out, And the first German boy I saw dead was one that the boy that was with me. We were all shooting. There's 2 Germans out in an open field. And they saw us and they started running. And this corporal, I'm not going to call his name, but he died a year ago. He was some reunion, and he's the one I'm sure killed the boy. We was all shooting, And the other one we wounded him, but we could see him. He got away. But this old boy, I went up and looked at him. And, you know, first thing hit my mind was his mother. And she's going to know about him being dead. And us killing him. And that's sad too, you know, very sad. But we, on the way back, going, I don't think I would have known which way to even start. I couldn't read maps or compasses or anything like that. But one of them was a sergeant that was with me at first. And he'd been prepped more than we had, I guess. And we worked our way back, but during that time working our way back, we ran into several Germans a few times and had skirmishes, you know, and had to do a lot of fighting to get back to our outfit. And I remember one occasion there, is in an apple orchard, and there's a railroad, a cut, and the railroad down in the cut, you know, and the Germans was on one side of that, and we was on the other, and in the apple orchard. We was all shooting at each other. And there's a bunch of these shrubbery things, you know, and they'd be about a foot dirt, and then the shrub would be on top of that. And I remember that one of those Germans threw one of those grenades across right where I was at. It's one of these, looks like a bottle, you know. And, of course, ours are little round grenades. And theirs made like a bowling pin and ball. And that thing come across just like it was going to get right to me. And, of course, I hit down by the dirt, and lo, it didn't get across. I heard it go off. He didn't. I said, that was one time that a lousy pitching arm saved me. But that was really, and now later on they said that they found some dead Germans over across there. But they were really just retreating, see, from up there where the fighting was really going on. And we was only supposed to stay in Normandy for, they told us we'd be relieved in 2 or 3 days. I think it must have been 30-something days, you know, that we was there. And so much of this stuff that you can't remember all of it, but I know, you know, what I'm telling here is true. And there's so much of the other stuff that went on that I am not telling because I don't want to misrepresent things. And, but then, as I say, we stayed there. When we got back to our outfit, a lot of more fighting and stuff done. A bunch of boys got killed. I knew most all of them in my company that I had. And so we went back to England. And I had a brother-in-law. I mean, he's my brother-in-law now, but at that time he was just a friend. He the one who married the girl I was talking about that dated my sergeant there. Yeah. And he had gotten a letter from my sister that I was missing in action. And they didn't know when they wrote the letter, you know.